Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me thank you for being here. The stories on this podcast are meant to let you know that you're not alone in what you're going through, and that we can all find strength in struggle with the right perspective. If you've been enjoying the podcast, let me ask that you leave a review on your platform of choice to help us grow so that we can continue to make the world a better place, one conversation at a time. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 50. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and we have a very special guest, the first one ever on this podcast from Kentucky, Austin Myers. Austin, what's going on, man?
Not much, Joe. I'm doing great. It's an absolute privilege to be here with you today.
The same goes for being here with you. It really does. And, we've known each other for what? Probably about a year now, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. We really got connected, I think earlier this year. And since then, it's just kind of been a friendship that's grown. And I'm really thankful for that.
I am as well. We have a lot in common. We're both very much into fitness, both more into the endurance space now. At least since the beginning of the year, I've been more into the endurance space. And we both love to write. I think you have some exciting news that we'll get into about writing and about your career path, but why don't you introduce yourself to the audience first, and then we'll dive in from there.
Yeah, that sounds great. My name is Austin Myers. I'm 26 years old. I am a son, brother, boyfriend, and hopefully a loyal friend. We'll get into my story as the podcast goes on, but essentially I'm a former teacher. Got into that career path out of college, and I did it because I believe in education. And ultimately I came to really have a passion for personal development as well. As you mentioned, I'm a fitness lover. I'm a marathon runner at the moment. I certainly have a lot of goals that I want to achieve outside of simply marathon running. But I just love fitness, and I love everything that it brings to my life and all that I'm able to invest into it. And at my core, I'm simply in the process of becoming, as I hope that, all of the listeners are, and they're really accepting of that fact that, we're just becoming something every single day. But at the same time, trying to balance the work that it takes to become something, and become a better version of yourself, but also balancing that with presence, which I think we can certainly dive into a little bit deeper as the podcast goes on.
Yeah, man, that was great. I think both of us love quotes. And so I'll throw a Bob Goff quote out there right off the bat. He said, "We're all still rough drafts of who we're becoming." And it's absolutely true. And so to dive in a little bit to, let's say, a career-oriented discussion. So you began as a teacher. What were you teaching?
Yeah, I, out of college, began teaching English language arts. And the original plan was to teach at the high school level, but the first job that came available was actually at the middle school level. So I ended up teaching for 2 years before I left the career field. And I was teaching English language arts because at least I knew that I loved writing, I loved reading, and I knew that there was immense amount of value out of that. And that's something that I wanted to communicate through my teaching. And I hope that I did in those 2 years. I really made sure that, I gave the practice of teaching and the career field all that it deserves, because it's such an important thing to have in our society. And I think in many ways it's undervalued. But in the time that I spent in that career field, there were certainly a lot of struggles, a lot of hardships that we'll get into. But at the end of the day, what I was doing was something that I believed in, and that is teaching and talking about reading and writing and just growing as a person.
When did you first fall in love with the process of writing?
It had to be college. And there's kind of a funny story behind that. I don't know if this was the exact moment that it happened. I was in an early level college English class. And there was an assignment that essentially, asked you to break down multiple forms of media, and you basically got to choose the topic. And I was and still am a very big Kanye West fan. So
Hmm.
I went deep in on that project, and I broke down album art, song lyrics, everything that you can imagine as far as forms of media from Kanye specifically. And I bring that up just because that's the one time, or the first time, that I can remember, just really loving the process of it. And I'm like, this is fun. Like, is this actually something that I can do? Like, I can have fun, but also be working and producing something. And, it's something that I was proud to share with my friends. I still am. I'm sure there's a file somewhere on my computer of it, but that's pretty much how far I can track it back to.
Mm. So I have a Kanye West quote pulled up here. I'm quick on the trigger.
You are.
Uh, so I'll go with this one here. I refuse to accept other people's ideas of happiness for me as if there's a one size fits all standard for happiness. And I think as much negative press as Kanye might attract at times, he does have a lot of really good insight on life. And it's just so fascinating for me to look at him, or really anybody else who has so much media attention on them, and the way they carry themselves, the way that they navigate life, their life experience. It holds all of these lessons that people like you and I, who don't walk out on the street and have paparazzi in our face, we don't get to experience. And so I think there's a lot of pressure there that I probably wouldn't want. But also, pressure is a privilege. And so to get back on track with your career path, this brings us now to a place where you leave teaching. Where are you? Where do you go after teaching?
Yeah. There was an opportunity, and I love to view things as opportunity. I try to use that word as much as possible, but also to understand that, if you're going to use the word, you really better believe in it. And there was an opportunity for my girlfriend and I, Abby, to travel. She's a travel nurse, or she's a nurse, excuse me. And there's great opportunities for nurses to travel all around the country, and to be able to do their job, but also get to appreciate new places. And that's what we wanted to do. So, I was in a career that I didn't feel like, fit the passions that I had. It just didn't really fulfill me. And we saw the opportunity to travel, and we decided to do that. So this is actually a year ago, last August, that we traveled. And, we'll definitely get into the story more as you go through the questions that you ask each episode. But, I left my career. Abby continued to travel nurse, and I just kind of set out on that path of self-discovery for myself. But in partnership as well. Abby and I grew so much together in the time that we traveled, and we're going to grow a lot more together here soon as we embark on another adventure. But, I just wanted, in that moment of my life, to embrace the fact that I could put myself in a situation and grow from it. And there were humongous upsides and amazing moments to it. And at the same time, there were some very low moments to it as well. So, it's something that I'll never forget, and I'm always going to be grateful for.
Mm. I'm excited to dig into that.
Yeah.
But since you hinted at it, what's the next adventure here? I know. So
Yeah.
why don't you tell everybody else what the next adventure is?
Yeah. The next adventure is an absolute dream, and something that, when I scheduled this podcast with you, I would have never guessed that I would be talking about, is the opportunity that I get to explore. And that is to be working for a company that I know you are aligned with, and very well, Bear Performance Nutrition, BPN. I just recently got the opportunity to join their team, so recently that I'm working remotely at the moment, and we're moving to Round Rock, the Austin, Texas area next week. But I'm joining their team as a content writer, and just so excited to be able to grow a brand, and more than anything, to be able to grow and expand the mission of the brand. It's something that I've believed in and I've followed for years, and to have the opportunity to join that team, this is really where I'm starting to feel the fulfillment that's already going to come from it. And, it's only been a few days in the making as well.
That's beautiful. For anybody listening to the podcast, there's a link in the description of this podcast. And if you click on that link, it'll take you to the Bare Performance Nutrition website. Yes, it helps me. It gives me some credit. But more than that, if you're not familiar with the brand, Austin would vouch for this. A lot of people listening would vouch for this. Check it out. Go to the website, not even for the supplements. Listen to the stories. Read about the mission. Follow the people. Join the community. It's truly incredible. And that's, I'm so excited for you, Austin. And so what's next? You guys are moving to Texas at some point, and then you'll settle down there, and then it's time to get to work for real.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you mentioned reading the stories on the website and consuming some of that information that we feel is so valuable. That's really my responsibility and the role that I'm accepting with BPN is to be able to tell these stories. To be able to spread a message that matters and to be able to empower people through fitness and the lifestyle that they can build. The supplements are amazing. Every supplement on their list is something that I believe in and that I could vouch for. But at the same time, it's really about just spreading a message that Go One More mindset and all that it can do for your life.
Yeah. That's well said. So I'm sure we're going to get back to that topic, but why don't I ask you the very first question, which is, what is the hardest thing or circumstance that you've ever had to handle in your life? Something that you did not get to choose.
Yeah. So, we'll discuss my time teaching in this realm. I chose teaching as a profession. It's something that I decided on in high school. And like I said, I knew I loved reading and writing, and I felt that I could definitely be a very good teacher in the field. And I hope that I was in the time that I served. But when you get into something, you don't always know what you're signing up for. You don't always, most of the time, you can't anticipate the problems that may arise and the struggles that you're going to face. And that's really where you grow. And I would not be where I'm at today if I did not have those 2 years of teaching experience and just all of the challenges that it forced me to face and all of the ways that I overcame them. But my time teaching was definitely the hardest thing, the hardest stretch of time that I've experienced in my life. And, I'll preface this entire discussion with the belief that, for the most part, I've lived a life of blessing and privilege. For me to say that, exploring a career path is the hardest thing that I've dealt with in my life. I'm fortunate to be able to say that, but at the same time, hard is relative. And in that moment of my life, it was extremely hard to show up to work every day, holding myself accountable for doing the job as well as it should be done, because I have students, I have families, I have futures that I hold as a responsibility to me because I was hired to do the job. And I don't take that lightly. I don't take that lightly right now with BPN. I don't take that lightly in my experiences of teaching. And that's something that I wanted to uphold and I wanted to do a good job of. And it was hard because I realized along the way that this was not something I would be doing for the rest of my life. And when you realize that, but you still have months that you have to pour into the work, and it's time and it's energy and it drains you, and you're wondering what is out there for you and you have to wait on it. It's hard. And if anyone's searching for, what their passion is, what is going to fulfill them in their life, it's an uncomfortable experience, but it's discomfort that we have to face if we're ever going to find it. I think if we don't face that discomfort head on, we may never find the thing that we're meant to be doing, the purpose that we're meant to be fulfilling. My time teaching was a challenge because of that, but at the same time, like I mentioned earlier, it had to happen. It had to happen for me to be here today.
So let me ask you this. What was the moment you realized, or if there was a moment or a period of time where you realized I'm going to leave teaching.
Yeah.
And what was that decision like for you specifically?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like I mentioned, I taught for 2 years. The first year that I taught was the 2019-2020 school year. So you can imagine that that was a doozy of a school year, as we hit March 2020 and we went virtual and basically learned that entire process together, as a world. And that moment, working from home in March, April, May of 2020, was the moment that I realized that this is not for me. I realized that, I've not wanted to show up to work as much as I want to show up to work every day. I wanted to search for the thing that I wake up every day and I'm just lit on fire to pursue. And I knew I didn't have that. Now, funny enough, I taught the next school year. That was my second school year of teaching. And, I don't regret that either. It's just something that I felt like I still needed to come back. I still needed to gain some more experience. Oddly enough, heading into that year, I did kind of think, you know what, I might just do this one more year and be done. But I told myself, if you're going to do this one more year, you have to show up as well as you can. You have to give all of yourself to this, and you have to understand that what you're taking away is going to be valuable down the road, and it has been. But like I mentioned, we kind of knew there was a deadline to it, as you get into that second school year, and Abby and I discussed the possibility of traveling. So when you're counting down those final few months, and it feels like, once it's over and once we're able to travel, it's going to be the beginning of the rest of our lives. It's hard to stay present in those moments. And that's a challenge that, presence is a challenge for many people, myself included. So, that was an additional challenge on top of it all was, okay, I've got 3 months, 2 months, 1 month left of teaching, days left of teaching. I may never teach again, but I still have to be present in these moments because people still rely on me. And that's what I did. And I'm grateful for those moments of my life for sure.
Yeah. That reminds me of episode 33 of this podcast with Chase Tuning. And he talked about leaving his job as a health coach, which he loved for a long time. And he loved the people he was working with and working for. But he realized that he was not showing up as his best self for those people, that they deserved better, and that he deserved to be somewhere or in a career path or in a place where he could show up every single day, with a different level of passion, with a different level of energy. And I think a lot of people listening to this podcast can relate on some level to what Chase felt, to what you felt, to what I felt before I left my job. Now, the difference between you and I is that I left my job with this 3-year background of online coaching that I was doing while I was building up to leave my job. And it was very strategic. While from the outside, maybe it appeared like I made this big leap. I had built up to that. Now, for you, what was the plan in terms of career path when you left teaching? Or was there a plan?
There was no plan. The plan was to travel to Colorado, which is where we moved to, and to figure it out. And I kind of told myself, we're going to keep this as simple as possible. Like, you're going to do what you like to do, and you're going to discover things along the way, and the pieces of the puzzle will come together. Now, in the moment, was it always that easy? Was I always like, yeah, the pieces of the puzzle are going to come together, it's going to be great? No. But I was excited about that opportunity to have the time and the space to figure it out. That alone is a privilege and a blessing that many people aren't able to have. But, I kind of created that opportunity out of those 2 years of teaching from a financial perspective, but also just trying to give myself the space to figure it out. Because when you're caught up in, the whirlwind of the day to day, it's very hard to piece together the puzzle. And that's what I knew I needed. So I tried to keep it as simple as possible. I tried to do things that I loved. That's really when I dove deep into running and my first marathon prep. And, I was just looking for a part-time job to start with. And that's ultimately what I ended up working until we left Colorado this past April. The first job opportunity that I explored was to work at a sandwich shop, very good sandwich shop in Colorado. Loved it a lot, so much so that I thought that I could see myself behind the counter making the sandwiches. And I'd like to think I would have done an awesome job of that. But next door to the sandwich shop was a running store in Colorado, and it was a local homegrown business. And that's something that excited me, was selling shoes, running merchandise, connecting with customers who believed in the same thing that I believed in. And really just, investing in values that are simple. Like, we want to be around people that we relate to. We want to have passion for things that we love, and we want to be able to pursue those things. And that's what I found in that experience is it really can be a simple approach. Let's do what we love. Now, is it always going to be that easy? Is it always going to work out in the best possible way? Absolutely not. But if we just continue to take step by step every single day, ultimately we can find ourselves in that position. We just have to be willing to put ourselves out there and kind of take a chance on ourselves, really.
Now, let me ask you this. This is a tough hypothetical question. Let's say Bear Performance Nutrition job wasn't an option. Say that didn't happen, and you're still sitting here. What are you doing at this moment if that's not what happens? And do you still have the same outlook and energy that you just shared with us?
Yeah. Let me take you to where I was at 4 weeks ago, before the Bear Performance Nutrition job became an option. I had accepted another teaching position to teach in the same school district that I was teaching in a high school. And I felt very unsure about the decision to take that job. But my belief was that I gave myself a year to figure it out, and things did not come together. Apparently, I need more time. I was going back into teaching. I knew I wasn't going to stay in it for the rest of my life. I'm not going to retire as a teacher. I knew that. But I knew that if I needed another year, another 2 years, another 3 years to figure it out, I could invest that. And that's what I was going to do. But then, a shot in the dark that I took a few months ago came to fruition, and I had an opportunity. And, I can kind of tell that story a little bit later if you want me to, for how we got to the BPM position. But
yeah, well, would it make sense to dive into it now, or should we hold that for the end?
We'll hold off. I'll circle back to it.
Sounds good. All right. So that brings us up to date with your life through, from one of the hardest seasons, if not the hardest season, to where you are now. Now, the second question, Austin, as you know, is what is the hardest thing that you've ever done on purpose, and why have you done that thing?
Yeah. Yeah. So, we're going to go back to traveling simply because that was certainly done on purpose. Now, we're going to break this up into two ways. We were in Colorado for 8 months total. And it was split up basically by a break around Christmas time, where we got to come home to Kentucky and spend some time with our families. And then we decided that we loved Colorado so much those first 4 months that we were going to go back. Basically same area. I was going to continue working at the running store. Abby was going to have a new travel nursing contract. So, it's kind of split up into 2 4-month periods that we had traveling. And, if we were doing this podcast last December, I could never have said that the hardest thing that I've chosen is traveling, because those first 4 months were absolutely amazing. I mean, it was a dream. Colorado's a beautiful place. We got to spend, Abby and I, a fall together. We created a Thanksgiving for ourselves, the first time we had done that solo. Just so many memories that we held so dear. And that's why we decided to come back this past January. And that's when it started to get hard. I think just having another 4 months without, I think the theme of it really was stability. I knew I was not going to work at the running store for the rest of my life. It was not going to be a full-time job, a career for me. Was it something I enjoyed doing? Absolutely. But I knew I still needed to create or find something else. And that started to really creep in the second 4 months. Um, I think that stability is a necessity. And that's why I was going back to teaching. I was telling myself that I'm going to go back to this stable career. I'm going to do the best that I can within that career, but I have to invest outside of it if I'm going to create something else. And that's kind of the mindset that I had. If I were to begin teaching here in a few weeks, that's the mindset that I had adopted. But let's go to February of, this past February, 2022. I was kind of looking for remote positions. That was in my head the ideal position, because we could continue traveling if we wanted to, and I could work full time remote. Now, it's not that easy to find a remote position. It's not that easy to find a job in the first place. I will say that. That was a lot of my struggle those 4 months and into the summer as well. But I was looking through these jobs, and I kept seeing content writer pop up as a job that companies were hiring for. And I was thinking to myself, I love writing, so much so that I was a, English language arts teacher, and I really enjoyed the writing piece of my teaching, probably more so than the reading. And I had started a newsletter this past January at the turn of the year into 2022. And Joe, that was really inspired by you getting your newsletter every Sunday morning. It was something I enjoyed reading, and really just adopting the principle of consistency. I felt this is, kind of a moment of intuition. And I think that intuition is extremely important for us to tap into. It was a moment of intuition for me that I just need to be doing something. I don't know what it is. So the lower barrier of entry for me coming into 2022 was, I'm going to put out 52 editions of a newsletter this year. So every Sunday, now it's Monday morning, I send out a newsletter. And I told myself, if nothing else, you're going to do that. And we're going to figure everything else around it. We're going to figure it out. So, I'm putting out a newsletter, and I'm like, yeah, I can write. I send out an email every week. I have X amount of subscribers. It's not a high number at all, but that doesn't really matter. So I'm looking at content writing positions, and I'm thinking to myself, who can you provide value to, and where do you want to provide value? And, BPN, Bear Performance Nutrition, Nick Bear, and the brand they're building there is something that I've believed in for many years. And they're a company with a tremendous amount of impact, but at the same time, they do not have an extremely large staff on hand. And I knew just from following the brand that they did not have a content writer. So taking a shot in the dark, like I mentioned earlier, and putting myself in extremely what felt like vulnerable position. I sent Nick, the CEO of Bear Performance Nutrition, and the marketing director of the company, an email. And I said, here's this position that I think would provide value to your company. Here's who I am. Here's how I feel like I can contribute to the brand and your mission. I sent that email. I can tell you the exact day, February 8th. And, a week after I sent that email, I felt so dumb. I was like, you just sent that email. You got no reply. And I had to sit on that for months. Now, it faded to the background for sure. I wasn't thinking about it too much come summertime when we moved back to Kentucky. But it was always something where I felt like I could do it. Like, it just felt right, but I didn't think it was going to happen. And, now we're into the summer. We're back home in Kentucky. I'm in the process of accepting a teaching position. And I told Abby one night, I said, I'm just so frustrated because I feel like every single day I wake up and I'm waiting on something, a sign to show me what I should actually be doing. And then every evening I'm so frustrated because the sign is not there. I haven't figured it out yet. I have not found it's not the final piece by any means, but the piece to the puzzle that I'm desperately trying to connect. And, I'm like, I just want to find it. I don't feel like I should be going back into teaching. And I woke up one morning and, I got on Instagram and I saw a story from Nick Bear, and it said, BPN is hiring a full-time content writer. And I got a certain feeling when I saw that. And I told myself that morning, I said, this is your sign. You're going to make this your sign. I couldn't sit there, though. I could not wait for him to go back to the email I sent on February 8th and for him to email me. It wasn't going to happen. So I followed up on that email, and I probably reached out in every other conceivable way that you can imagine. Oh, and then I had to sit on that for 3 more weeks. And basically now here we are on, again, I can tell you the exact day, July 5th, and I'm in the dentist. I get an email and a LinkedIn message from Nick Bear. And, there were so many moments that led up to that moment, but just to feel that, I, in some small way, created that opportunity. It was a special feeling, but, the job wasn't even, sealed in that moment either. I had an opportunity to write them a few articles and to prove myself and that I could serve in that position. And fortunately, they saw a value in what I provided them. And, I'm just so fortunate to be here today, but I'd be lying if I didn't say that the path to this moment was filled with so much self-doubt and unassuredness. And I know that I'm going to feel that moving forward as well. Now I get the opportunity here in a week and a half to step into a room of people who I know are doing such amazing work. And I have to prove to myself that I can do the amazing work as well, and that I have something to contribute. Really just, pushing back against that imposter syndrome that I think that we all feel in certain ways. But, I would never have chosen a different path for how I've gotten here today, despite how uncomfortable it was.
Matt, I have two quotes and 2 thoughts, and then I'm just going to let you talk because I feel like you have a lot to say. Good stuff. So the quotes, actually, let me start with the thoughts. So the first thought is, the answer is always no if you never ask. And there's nothing wrong with asking for things, with putting yourself out there, with putting yourself in a position to be vulnerable, to have an opportunity. There's nothing wrong with asking. Now, there's a difference between asking for something that's totally out there and there's no basis for, and then there's asking for things that you're qualified for and things that you believe in. So if you didn't ask, right, that opportunity wouldn't be there. The other thought is that I think a lot of times people see the outcome, they see the product, they see Austin got a job at Bear Performance Nutrition. That's incredible. He must have just applied and they accepted his application. Or, Joe has this podcast and he does all these things and knows a bunch of cool people and he must just have gotten connected with them. I have sent thousands of DMs. I have spent hundreds of hours on the phone over the past 5+ years. I am constantly planting seeds. That's how I think about it, right? Every day I'm planting seeds. And just this past week, I had a coffee date, if you will, with a stranger, and that was covered on the news. And the reason that was covered on the news was because a year ago, when I quit my job, I had extra time on my hands, and I started getting coffee with strangers. I would buy a stranger a cup of coffee and get to know them for an hour. And I did that enough times where I decided, let me write a blog about this. And I put it out there on the internet. And I did that a couple times. And then out of the blue, 6 months after I stopped doing those coffee with strangers, I got approached by a news channel here in Philadelphia to cover the story. And that was a seed that was planted. Now, I had no intention of getting that covered on the news, but I planted the seed and look what happened. So I think those are 2 thoughts. And the 2 quotes I'll leave you with. Jillian Dodd, just because there's a goalie doesn't mean you can't score, right? Just because there's no job opening, right, doesn't mean you can't take the shot. And then 2, this is a longer quote. Michael E. Gerber said, the difference between great people and everyone else is that great people create their lives actively while everyone else is created by their lives, passively waiting to see where life takes them next. The difference between the two is the difference between living fully and just existing. So, Austin, after hearing all of that, what thoughts come to mind?
Yeah. As you were talking, I was just thinking about, what's in a name? What is in our names? Um, we have to provide life to the name that we've been given. Like initially, we're given the name in some situations before you're born, and some situations shortly after. And there's life there, but that life has to be invested in day after day, year after year. You have to provide meaning to the name that you've been given. You have to make your name matter to other people. I hope that we all have a support system that I feel that I have, where no matter what I do with my life, my name will matter to the people who love me most. But if I want to achieve at a high level, if I want to reach levels and do things and have experiences and provide opportunities for those around me that I never would have thought possible, I have to make my name matter outside of simply what it means right now. And I think we do that, like you mentioned, by planting the seed. And as you were saying that, I was thinking about, the quote or the saying that I know you have tattooed on your arm, which is planted, not buried. And I thought a lot about that January through April when we were in Colorado, and I was lost. I mean, I was with Abby 15 and a half hours away from the rest of our family. And I was so confused by what I'm supposed to make out of my name. And I just kept telling myself, it's going to make sense. It's all going to make sense at some point. How long you have to wait before it begins to make sense, I don't know. But if you just continue to do the right things, it will all come to fruition.
I could not agree more with that. And so, Austin, with all of that being said, you're now a content writer at Bear Performance Nutrition. Do you continue to carry on with your own personal writing? Do you continue to build your name in the same ways you've been building your name in the past?
Yeah. At this point, the deal that I signed with myself at the beginning of the year was to write 52 newsletters. And just because I've gotten to this point does not mean that I get to break that deal with myself. So I can certainly promise that I will provide the free newsletter that I send out every Monday morning. I will put that out every single week. And at the end of 2022, there will be 52 editions of the Manifest newsletter, which is at the moment the name of my newsletter. And as far as other writing and the continuation of the newsletter in and of itself, every week when I sit down to write that newsletter, I write the words that I need to see and hear. That's my form of journaling. I certainly make sure to present it in a way that I hope provides value to other people, but it allows me to process the things going on in my life. I know that it helped me so much in those harder months to be able to sit down and write that and have that solitude and create that space for myself. So I do see myself continuing to put that out every single week. Now, as far as, how hard I try to market it or sell it to other people, I don't know. But I do hold myself accountable for the things that I feel like provide my life with value. And writing is certainly one of those things.
Yeah, I can relate very, very heavily to that. I was journaling this morning at 4:00 in a dark room on a couch. That's usually how my mornings start. And I was thinking to myself, I cannot imagine what my life would look like without writing. Now, if middle school Joe heard Joe right now say that, he would have thought something really terrible or crazy happened, because I hated writing. I hope you don't take offense to this, Austin. I hated everything related to English, language arts, history, you name it. I could not stand that side of school growing up for some reason. And then as soon as I left high school, actually, confession, I don't know if any of my high school teachers listen to this podcast. Probably not, but who knows? I never read a chapter book until I was out of high school. I had never read a single book until I was done with high school. How wild is that? And now I have a bookshelf that probably weighs about 400 pounds because I just recently moved it from an apartment to a house. And I love reading and I love writing. And I can't imagine being able to conceptualize my life the way that I can see it right now if I had never gotten into the habit of writing and journaling. And I'm not sure if you feel the same way, but it just helps me get so clear every single morning.
Yeah, as you're talking, I'm thinking two things. Number one, your note on, not loving writing or reading in school. That was a challenge that I faced a lot as a teacher. A lot of the education system right now is built off of curriculum and standards, and it kind of puts you in a box as a teacher. That's not to say that creativity is not encouraged. It certainly is. But at the end of the day, what matters is your ability to get students to pass tests and standards. And fortunately, the school district that I was working in really took a holistic approach to it and created something that was titled by them the profile of a graduate, which is basically like, what are the character traits of a graduate of the school district? And that's something that we as teachers could really lean on, basically to be able to say, okay, we can look a little bit beyond the standards. We're certainly still going to teach to the standards and make sure that the students can do the reading and writing skills that they need to, but we can also create a mature adult from this profile of a graduate. So that's point number one. I understand that, there's a lot of barriers to entry in the education system for students and teachers alike. And thought number two is really that you don't know what you need until you either need it or you get it and you realize how much value it provides to you. And I think that's what I found with writing. I just started writing. I always felt like I was a decent writer. So I was like, you know what, maybe that's where you need to go with things. Like, just put out a blog post. And again, vulnerability, like put it out on Facebook, see what people say. And obviously small, like one little nice compliment can get you to write another blog post, right? But even outside of the blog post, like, what if I had no subscribers to my newsletter? Would I still write it? I view it as a personal journal, and I just happen to send it to people every Monday morning. And I do that, and I continue to show up for myself every week because I know that more than anything, I need it. Like, I need that time to process, and I need the energy that it gives me to piece together the thoughts and then to put it out in the world. I think it's important that we consider the energy that we're putting out in the world. And there's many ways to do that, but you have to be aware of it, because when we lose that awareness of the energy that we're putting out, it can really be destructive to not only our own lives, but the people around us.
Yeah. Going back to the concept of school, there was this saying, and I'm sure everybody's heard it in some form: sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And at the time when you hear that as a kid, you think, oh, it makes sense. Words are just words. They can't hurt, right? Not in a physical sense, like a stick or a stone. And then you get older and you realize that words really do hurt. And to go back to what you said about, right, one nice compliment could make you write another blog. I've tried my best to make it a habit. If I feel like giving somebody a compliment, if I think something nice, I'm going to say it. It doesn't matter if it is my wife, a friend, the cashier at the grocery store. If I think something nice, I'm going to say it out loud for that exact reason. And on the flip side, I think either of us would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge all of the people throughout our lives, both close and far, who have been that for us, who have been that little injection of positive energy into our life at a moment where we needed it. And that other person might have not even known that was the case, that we needed that positive energy. So I think, being intentional with our words, being aware of the energy that we're bringing to everyday life are incredibly, incredibly important. And then to take it a step further and maybe transition into the next question is that in addition to words, in addition to energy, I think the things that we do behind closed doors, the things that we do that other people don't necessarily get to see, are equally, if not more important, because it's those things that shape the person that we become. So it's that long run that nobody else would know if you cut it a mile short. It's that moment at the refrigerator when you're by yourself and should you or should you not eat that food that you said you were not going to eat. It's whatever it is for you behind closed doors. And so, Austin, let me ask you a little bit about those moments in your life. You don't have to go into great detail, but how do you view the topic of integrity, let's say, and how important that is in your life?
Yeah. It's crucial. I hold myself to a standard that is a little bit uncomfortable at times. Like I'll get very frustrated and that unfortunately bleeds into my relationships and my interactions with the people that I love, because if I get frustrated at myself for not achieving at the highest level that I felt like I should have, it kind of takes my mind away from the present moment, which I think is a really tough thing to deal with, and is kind of a maturity thing that hopefully I'll grow in as I continue to progress through my life. But integrity is huge, because I think for me it really comes from trying to prepare yourself at all times for whatever may come in life. Like if I would have seen the opportunity to work for BPN as a content writer a few weeks ago and felt like I did nothing to put myself in that position, I don't really know how I would have felt. But I told myself at the beginning of the year that I was going to show up, and I've showed up in more ways than simply writing a newsletter. But it's just those little actions, they build you into the person that you are meant to become, but you have to overcome the resistance of it. I'm going to pull the one quote that I've been sitting on, Joe. I prepared one quote for this podcast, and I absolutely love it. It's from Stephen Pressfield, who's an absolutely amazing author. His most popular book is The War of Art, but he has a lot of great books. And the quote goes, "Most of us have two lives, the life we live and the unlived life within us. Between the two stands resistance." And I think the great thing about Stephen Pressfield is he presents resistance as the enemy that we're all facing. We have a common enemy, and it's resistance. And what is resistance? It's a force. It's a force that tells you that you should not send that email that you want to send. It's a force that says, no, you don't need to write this newsletter this week. No one cares. It's a force that takes so many different forms, and it's unique to each of us. But we have to push it back. We have to fight against it. And if we don't, if we succumb to the resistance, we will never know what that life was that we were meant to live.
Yeah, there's a great story that has been told in many different forms, and probably at some point on this podcast. At this point, we're 50 episodes in. I just ran in the 100-degree heat. My brain can't remember a thing, so I'm going to tell it. But there's a soldier, and he had the chance to become a general at one point during his life, but he turned it down because he didn't think he can do a good job. So he eventually passes away. He gets to the gates of heaven, and there's an angel there, and the angel says, "Do you want to know anything about your life?" And the soldier says, "Yeah, I'm just curious who the greatest general of all time was." And the angel looks at him and says, "It was you." And the soldier is super confused, and he goes, "No, I wasn't a general. I was just a soldier." And the angel says, "No, it was supposed to be you." And I get the chills when I hear that, because it's that moment you realize that you had untapped potential that you left on the table because you didn't think you were good enough, or you gave in to the resistance. And I think it's such a powerful concept that's easy to talk about in a setting like this. But when we're in the day-to-day nitty-gritty small moments that nobody gets to see, it can be easy to lose the importance of that topic, to lose the weight of that topic and that thought. So I'm curious for you, Austin, as we look at the concept of endurance, because obviously to fulfill potential, you have to endure, you have to continue moving toward that potential through the resistance over a long period of time throughout life. When you hear the word endurance, what does that mean to you?
It means that you continue to choose resistance every single step of the way. Now, Joe, you and I are both training for the New York City Marathon at the moment. We often hear that life is a marathon, not a sprint. And that's certainly true. I think that life's probably a little bit longer than a marathon, because a marathon certainly does end. But when you get to those harder miles of a marathon, the steps start to hurt a little bit more. And you just have to choose to keep moving forward. Now, that's the really simple way of looking at it. But, another way that I consider endurance is that you can't settle. Like, there's probably an agreement that you made with yourself at some point, and it could have been something small. It could have been, oh man, that would be really cool one day to achieve this or to work at this place. That was an agreement that you said, what if that was a possibility? Like, could I actually do that? And for so many of us, and so many probably times in my life, I've said, no, that you couldn't do that. But for that like split second, I had convinced myself. Maybe I peered into that point of my life where I was told, no, that was supposed to be you. You were supposed to live that. You were supposed to make your impact in that way. But we settle. We settle because we perceive what's happening around us to be too much for us in that moment. We lose sight of the fact that the only step that matters is the next step. And it doesn't even matter if you're brought to your hands and knees and the next step is with your hand moving forward to drag yourself forward. You've got to take it, because the only other choice is that you settle. And at some point, I don't know when it's going to be, if we were to choose the route of succumbing to endurance, but the only other choice is that you're going to look back at some point and say, what if? And that has to be the worst feeling. And I don't ever want to feel that feeling. And that's really what endurance is to me, is that we're not going to settle. We're going to choose the resistance, no matter how badly it pains us to do it, because it's going to lead us to the place that we were intended to go when we were created and given this name that we were given.
Mic drop. I mean, yes, everything. Yes. I have a quote that I pulled up specifically for this podcast episode because I thought you would enjoy it. And I want to follow up your definition of endurance with this quote from Matt Fitzgerald. It's a little bit on the longer side, but it's worth it. He said, "Every athlete who has pushed beyond his or her known limits of endurance in the quest for improvement understands these sentiments. There is no experience quite like that of driving yourself to the point of wanting to give up and then not giving up. In that moment of raw reality, as Mark Allen has called it, when something inside you asks, how bad do you want it? An inner curtain is drawn open, revealing a part of you that is not seen except in moments of crisis. And when your answer is to keep pushing, you come away from the trial with the kind of self-knowledge and self-respect that can't be bought."
I love it. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about a lesson that I've learned from running and from writing. And it's that the hardest point is the entry point. When I'm going into a big workout towards a marathon goal, the hardest part of it is to take the first step. As hard as it, as weird as it may sound, because the workout gets hard and it gets really uncomfortable. But I think that people will find that when you really get into the nitty gritty of it all, so you can be, writing something that you didn't want to sit down and write, when you really settle into the work, there's a flow to it. There's discovery within that. And, I think that I find myself in running that once I get into those workouts, like, it hurts. It doesn't feel good. But the things that I feel, I know are changing me, are helping me to grow into a different person. you have to face the resistance, though. You have to go into that entry point. And then the other point that I would make on that is there's another point that's really hard. And that point is near the end. And this is another thing from Stephen Pressfield, not an exact quote, but just a concept, that resistance is at the highest when you are the closest to achievement or realization. Like you're going to hit, and I kind of felt this, with this opportunity with BPN. Resistance was so high and I was so confused and lost that I just said, go back into your teaching profession. You'll figure it out from there, but just go back. And what I told Abby was, once this opportunity with BPN came to be, I said, look how powerful the world is in your favor when you choose something that isn't aligned with the person you're meant to become. Like, I got a message from Nick Bear. Nick Bear is, he's sending me an email, but it's because I was about to go down a path that was not intended for my life at that moment. And the world will move in our favor, but we have to put the action and the investment into it. We have to pour into the world if we want to get anything in return from it.
I'm pretty sure you're flowing into this final part of the conversation already, because so much of that could apply to somebody who is or was or is in your shoes from 4, 8, 12 months ago. Not sure where they want to go, not sure what they want to be, not sure what they want their name to represent. And so for this fourth question, Austin, if somebody listening to this podcast is in that place, maybe it's confusing, maybe it's overwhelming, maybe it's frustrating, upsetting, discouraging, you name it. It's not a good place to be. And they're listening to this podcast. What would you say to that person right now in that season of life?
Yeah. Believe in yourself. Bet on yourself. And, it's one thing to believe in yourself, but I think that when you bet on yourself, that means that you're putting action behind it. There's going to be obstacles that stand in all of our way. And, I think a big piece to this puzzle that I felt in this experience is vulnerability. Like you feel like you're stripped down to nothing when you have no idea what to do next. And you don't know where you're going with your life. Every decision that you make does not feel right. You're like, no, this can't be it. Like, should I really be taking this little action? And that's a really vulnerable moment as a person to not understand that the actions that you're taking, but it's important to understand that the actions that you're taking will make sense one day. Like the little thing that you did today, that little email that I sent on February 8th, that little thing that you may do right after listening to this podcast could all make a difference. And, when I consider this entire experience and this opportunity that I have with BPN, like the most important day in this entire thing was not the day that I actually got contacted and got the opportunity to write an article. It was the day that I put myself out there. And how far do we to take that back? I mean, I put myself out there when I left a stable career field. I put myself out there when I sent an email that could have never gotten a reply, and it didn't for months. And, it's just important to embrace that vulnerability. I know, if you're looking for reading on that topic, Brene Brown's a really good one. But it's just the uncomfortable stuff that we have to do. And a final point that I like to think about a lot, if it relates to any of the listeners, is, have a chip on your shoulder a little bit. Like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, I've lived a life of privilege. I can't complain about anything. I have an amazing family, amazing support system. I'm healthy, just so many blessings. It's hard to say that I have a chip on my shoulder, but I think that we can create one. And I think that it's important that we do, because, if we find that little thing that gives us the edge that we need to show up that day, because you're going to, without even realizing it, along the journey, you're going to put yourself down at times. And that's just a form of resistance. But that chip on your shoulder, from my experience, it'll lift you up a little bit and it'll say, no, you got this. Like, prove them wrong. Even if no one's doubting you. Like, dude, no one cares enough about most of us to doubt us. But if you tell yourself that someone's doubting you and you show up and you do the work, isn't that all that matters? Like, we just need to do the work. We need to overcome the resistance in that moment and then move on to the next moment. Use whatever strategy you need as long as the work gets done.
You know, it's funny. I think I talked to the resistance. I alluded to the fact that I went out on a run today, super hot and humid here in Philadelphia. I think the heat index was 105, and there are probably people listening in other parts of the country or other countries and like, 105, that's nothing. But for me, it was hot. And I was talking to the heat. That chip for me today was the heat. The heat didn't want me to do that run, right? But I did it and it felt good. It felt really good to do that run. So it doesn't even have to be a person, but I agree that chip is a powerful thing. So Austin, we're both training for the New York City Marathon. By the time this episode comes out, we'll be about 2 months away from the race. I'll probably run my first mile with you and then you'll leave me in the dust. But what are you shooting for? Do you have a goal in mind? Do you have a target that you're shooting for?
You know, it's a funny situation that I'm in. I knew I was running this marathon before I ran my most recent marathon, which was the Buffalo, New York Marathon. And again, the way that we do things that allow the world to conspire for us, I signed up for that marathon because Nick Bear was running that marathon. And telling myself, I said, you're going to run, close to 3 hours in Buffalo. And then the New York City Marathon is going to be your big day. And you're going to run a sub 3 hour marathon. Well, fortunately enough, and I think part of this was due to getting to train in Colorado at elevation and altitude. I was able to run under 3 hours in Buffalo. So coming into this next, marathon training cycle, the time goal is lower 250s. But honestly, I'm kind of wrestling with myself. And I think, when race day comes, the real goal is just going to be able to enjoy that moment. I've heard such amazing things about the atmosphere of the New York City Marathon. So, whatever the paces are that come up on my watch on that day, I have a feeling that's not where my eyes are going to be going. Probably going to be running with the heart on that day more than anything. And whatever time I cross the finish line, it's all good because it's going to be a great experience.
Yeah, I feel very much the same. Every single person I talk to just has amazing things to say about the experience and about the energy, except from what I hear, there's a point in the race on a bridge. I'm not sure what mile, maybe around mile 16. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's dead silent, right?
Yeah, there's no spectators. It's just feet pattering on the bridge.
Yeah.
And then you go into Manhattan and then there's more people, of course. But yeah. I'm excited for that. Oh,
you're going to crush it, man. I've been following along with your training. It's awesome to see that transition that you've made into marathon training. And I'd be more than happy to share a few miles with you on that day for sure.
Awesome, man. Probably just the first 2, because honestly, I can't keep up after that. But if anybody wants to follow along with your training, with your writing, with your journey, or if they just want to connect, where's the best place for people to do that?
Yeah. Best place to find me is probably Instagram at Austin Myers 12. Through Instagram, you could find the link to my personal website where you could subscribe to my newsletter, the Manifest newsletter. Basically just encouragements and strategies and ideas on how we can all, the word that I've really come to early on in this year. And I feel like somehow I've brought it to fruition is just that we can manifest, our success and the future that we want to have for our lives. So it's called the Manifest newsletter. You can find it through my social media, and hopefully here soon you can see some of the content and the impactful work that we're putting out on the Bear Performance Nutrition website.
Awesome. Well, I will certainly be staying up to date with all of that. And Austin, thank you so much for this conversation, man. And I'll see you in a few months in New York.
Absolutely, Joe. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Indoor Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.